Back in April 1961, the world held its breath. Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin had just become the first human in space. America was stunned. In the Oval Office, President Kennedy knew the United States had lost the first round of the space race. Just 2 weeks later, he stood before Congress and made a vow that would change history. "I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth." This wasn't just about science. It was a political gamble, a challenge to Soviet dominance. At the time, no one had even landed a probe on the moon. Many scientists thought it was impossible. But Kennedy staked America's honor on it, and the nation roared in approval. The Apollo program was born, a colossal undertaking costing over $200 billion in today's money and employing 400,000 people. It was the largest peacetime technological project in human history. To make this dream a reality, NASA needed the best of the best. They found them in the Mercury 7, elite military pilots who had danced with death in experimental aircraft. Among them was Neil Armstrong, a quiet, brilliant pilot who preferred flying to fame. This was a man who, years earlier, had parachuted out of a malfunctioning jet and walked miles through the desert to safety. For Armstrong, facing the impossible was just another day at the office. But bravery alone couldn't get them to the moon. NASA's engineers faced monumental challenges. First, they built the Saturn V, the most powerful rocket ever created. Standing 110 meters tall, it had the thrust of 150 jumbo jets taking off at once. Next, they designed the lunar module, a fragile-looking craft nicknamed the Eagle. Every single part had to be perfect, because 380,000 kilometers from home, there's no roadside assistance. Their most brilliant innovation? A two-stage lander. By leaving the landing legs behind, the ascent module was light enough to escape the moon's gravity with minimal fuel. It was a stroke of engineering genius. Then, tragedy struck. In January 1967, during a ground test for Apollo 1, a fire broke out in the command module. Astronauts Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee were lost. The nation mourned, and Congress questioned if the cost was too high. But instead of giving up, NASA doubled down on safety, making over 1,000 modifications to the spacecraft. This heartbreaking setback ultimately made the entire program safer and may have saved future lives. Finally, the day arrived. July 16, 1969. At the Kennedy Space Center, the Saturn V stood like a monument to human ambition. Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins climbed into their capsule. As the countdown echoed across the globe, 600 million people watched, their breath held in collective anticipation. 3.2.1 Ignition. The engines roared to life, and the colossal rocket slowly lifted off, pinning the astronauts to their seats with crushing G-forces. "We are go for launch," Armstrong calmly reported. The Saturn V pierced the sky, burning 15 tons of fuel every second. For those first 12 seconds, there was no escape. They were fully committed to the journey. For the next 3 days, the astronauts lived in a space smaller than a car, hurtling through the void. They ate rehydrated food from pouches and performed constant calculations. One tiny error, and they would miss the moon and drift into infinite space. As Earth shrank in the window behind them, Armstrong wrote, "You understand what small really means." While Armstrong and Aldrin prepared to land, Michael Collins became the loneliest man in the universe. He orbited the moon alone in the command module, Columbia. His job was to wait. If his crewmates couldn't make it back, he would have to fly home alone, leaving them behind. His crucial role is often forgotten, but without him, there was no way home. Then came the descent. Armstrong and Aldrin separated in the Eagle and began their powered descent. Suddenly, an alarm blared. 12:02. The guidance computer was overloaded. In Houston, controllers scrambled. What is 1202? No one knew offhand. A 26-year-old flight controller, Steve Bales, frantically searched his notes. Seconds felt like hours. Finally, he spoke. Houston, we are go on that alarm. Continue descent. Bales had remembered the alarm from a simulation months prior. His split-second judgment saved the mission. But the danger wasn't over. Armstrong saw that the computer was taking them into a field of massive boulders. He took manual control, his hand steady on the joystick, scanning for a safe spot to land. But the fuel was running out. Mission Control began the chilling countdown. 1 minute fuel. Armstrong didn't answer. 30 seconds. The silence in Houston was absolute. 15 seconds. Just then, Armstrong spotted a small, clear patch. He guided the Eagle down. Contact light, Aldrin called. They had touched down. Armstrong's calm voice came through the radio. Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Mission Control exploded in cheers and tears. They had landed with just 25 seconds of fuel to spare. After 6 hours of checks, the hatch opened. Armstrong slowly descended the ladder. Each step was deliberate. Then, his boot touched the fine lunar dust. Across the world, people watched in awe. Armstrong's voice crackled through, immortalized in history. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. He and Aldrin spent over 2 hours on the surface, bouncing in the low gravity, planting the American flag, and collecting lunar rocks that would revolutionize our understanding of the solar system. Leaving the moon was just as perilous. They fired the ascent engine, leaving the descent stage behind, and blasted back into lunar orbit. Collins, their lifeline, had piloted Columbia perfectly. The rendezvous was flawless. "Welcome back," he said, as his crewmates floated back into the command module. 3 days later, they plunged back into Earth's atmosphere, enduring a 3,000-degree inferno. After a period of radio silence that felt like an eternity, the parachutes deployed, and they splashed down safely in the Pacific. Humanity had touched another world and returned. Why does Apollo 11 still matter so much? On the surface, it was a Cold War victory, but its true significance is much deeper. It proved that human determination, when united, can achieve the impossible. It inspired a generation to believe in the power of technology, fueling the computer revolution that shapes our world today. Innovations created for Apollo, from fireproof materials to the ancestors of computer chips in your phone, transformed everyday life. Paradoxically, after this triumph, the political will faded. No human has walked on the moon since 1972, but the Apollo spirit lives on. Today, new nations and companies are aiming for the moon, building on the legacy of that incredible mission. Armstrong's one small step was not just his own. It was the step of 400,000 people who poured their genius and dedication into a single, shared goal. Apollo 11 showed us that we are not bound by our limits. It proved that when we dream together and work together, the only real boundary is our own imagination. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey. If you were inspired by this story, please hit that like button and subscribe for more adventures into history and science. See you next time.